Good morning, Electroculture Safety Partners. Welcome to 062. Mr. Billy Martin, he's going to be talking about moving from defend mode to discover mode. So this is going to be really good. Billy's been here 3 other times. This is your 3rd year now, Billy, being here. And appreciate Billy being here, but Mr. Martin, he's exactly the example of what electroculture safety is all about, where folks come in from all parts of the United States and share their expertise at no cost for you all. You all can share these recordings. There's going to be 62 in the next week or so. You can share them with your crews. Beer pays for them. Mr. Martin pays for it. These folks pay for it. Their trip down, their expertise, they pay for it. So this is a great opportunity to share with your crews as we together foster line team attitude. We are building a line team nationwide. Never has happened before in the history of basically the world, and I don't think it will happen. Electroculture of safety, just so everybody knows, we did receive after 3 years from the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, we received the patent. So it's always going to be protected. Will never ever be tainted with folks wanting to make money from it. So this is always going to be free for you all. And we appreciate you all. Now 14,000 plus partners nationwide. And we've got all kinds of partners that have given their company logos. Miss Cheryl Richardson, who spoke yesterday representing H. Richardson and Sons, they just gave their logo about a week or so ago, maybe 2 weeks ago. And we really appreciate all the companies helping out and jumping on board and supporting this. Mr. Billy, real quick, he came here when we first started, and he was 004. So he was the 3rd speaker. He spoke about flip the safety dynamic. If you don't have it, you need to get it. And then he also spoke 009, practice primes proficiency, tactical safety. You remember that, Billy?
I do.
Yeah, that was awesome. And definitely got to get that as well. And then he came again in 2023, July, and he spoke on moving from human performance to human potential, tapping into our human potential. And real quick shout out to Miss Susan. We saw you're registered and you're watching this live. Miss Susan, how you doing? And thank you all for your support. And Mr. Billy's got a really good one for you. We've been talking about it, had a great dinner last night, talking about it for, I don't know, almost 2 hours. I mean, don't even eat, and time just disappears. You start talking. And Billy's really good at talking, and you're going to realize that today. So appreciate it. And brother, thank you for coming here, man.
Hey, man.
Appreciate you. Okay? Thank you.
It's really a pleasure to be here. I mean, I'm sitting in a tent where 61 other speakers so far have been here, now 2 a month. People like Danny Rains and Jim Vaughn and Brandon Wiley, Cheryl Richardson, Raphael Lito Wilkins, Summer Ray. I mean, I can just keep going with all these names. And what I've learned from listening to all these is some of the best information from the heart is coming out of this tent. The interesting thing is what I'm going to talk about today isn't about the information, it's about how to translate it into a change at work. Because our country's full of good information and really good training, and I mean, if I had a USB port to stick in Jimmy Vaughn's head, it would be awesome. I could just plug in. But if we're not in sync, we can't receive the information to pass it through to each other. So this is about moving from defend mode to discover mode. Those are my 2 dogs there. Finn's the big one. He's a rescue Great Pyrenees, and the little one's Willow. She's a Tibetan Terrier. It's the first webinar they've ever been on. They're a little nervous, I think. But I'm going to talk about going from defend mode to discover mode, and I'm going to tell you, I'm going to talk a little bit about you guys in a minute, but we got to have a little discussion because I'm going to talk about things that are original, things that you're not going to be able to pick up somewhere else. It's a combination of neuroscience, behavioral psychology, and a lot of the other speakers. And so it's original stuff, but it's all true and real. It's based in objective reality. Objective reality is what is. So those two words, defend mode and discover mode, I'm going to explain those. But there's invisible forces that are a result of the mode you choose. Your body releases different neurochemistry based on all kinds of years of evolution, depending on which mode you're in. One moves you forward and one doesn't. So the transaction that occurs between you and everything around you, right, is what makes this work. If I'm just doing a narrative and we don't create a push-pull, then it's like going to a movie. If at the end of the day I motivate you, that's great, but I have to give you something to do in order to create a transaction. All right? So let's see if we can move on here. So let me just explain that transaction for a minute. I row, that long skinny boat, when I row, it's a transaction between me, the boat, the oars, and the water. If I remove any part of that transaction, I don't row, right? If you go to the store and you buy a cup of coffee, it's a transaction between you, your money, the coffee, and the clerk. Remove any part of that transaction. So if we're in defend mode and we've dismissed people around us, they're not in your transaction. And you're missing a piece of your puzzle. So we're going to be talking a little bit more about that. The other thing I want to talk about, my wife is doing really well. She has multiple myeloma. In 2019, we were in Dana-Farber. She was getting a stem cell bone marrow transplant, right? Bone marrow stem cell transplant. And that takes a month. And it's like, you know, you guys, we're all going through something. And when you go to work and you got that stuff on your mind, the other people in your job need to know. But we don't share enough of that stuff. So in order for me to get my mind right, I went rowing on the Charles with a group every day for 90 minutes. And I had some people look at me like, you know, your wife's in the hospital and you're out here having fun? Well, no, I'm here to get my mind right so I can spend 12 hours, meaningful hours in the hospital, right? So there's something I learned there from my coach, who has also coached Olympic athletes. And she says, you know, these boats are really efficient, Bill. They're long, 26 feet long, skinny little boats. They're designed very efficiently, and you'll never be as efficient as the boat. Anything you do to move against the direction of travel will slow down that boat. So I'm going to tell you, when you're in defend mode, you're moving against the direction of travel. That thing she told me is a metaphor for life. Right? When you're moving with the boat, it's good. But when you're moving against the boat, kicking and screaming and dragging your fingernails, it's not as good. So this is an old ECOS from the early on. I mean, when you look at the banner now, it's so full. I mean, I can't imagine that we've gotten this far. But kudos to all you guys that have joined. This is by the industry for the industry. And I just want to thank you all for being part of it, because this is a team sport, all right? And in doing that, I call this what you've done. So I have to explain a little bit to you guys who you are, because I'm not sure you're completely aware. The people in the electrical industry occupy less than 1 million people in the country, maybe 800,000 people. There's 340 million people here, so you're a very small percentage of the country. And you guys, no matter who you are in this company, as soon as the weather turns, everybody goes in gear and they separate themselves so they can do the mission. Their life is separated from the mission, right? You have to separate yourself from the mission. You have to, in order to do this. Navy SEALs are trained to do this, separate self from the mission. But we do it automatically in this industry. And I think you need to pat yourself on the back for being that small percentage. And what it means, if you're listening to this and you're in this industry, it means you're not normal. You probably already know that, you know. I've been aware of it for a long time. But the fact that you're not normal, you are just a small piece that moves towards the storm, into danger, while other people are just flicking their lights on and off, waiting for it to come on. So thank you for accepting that mantle of responsibility. But because of that, you're also in danger of what this does to you. Because when you separate yourself from the mission, sometimes it's hard to reconnect. So I got to do a little commercial here. This isn't totally part of this program, but there's enough going on that I have to do this. The fact that we can't reconnect, it brings up a whole nother subject. mental health in our industry is in trouble, right? In my region, there's more suicides than there were deaths from injuries. It's not our fault, right? Everybody here, if whatever language you were born speaking isn't your fault, you were born speaking it. One of 7,139 languages in 195 countries you could be speaking. It's not our fault. It's not our fault that we've developed to where we are. But I'm going to tell you today, forward is the only direction. Today we move forward. We can't change the past. Did you guys know that? We can't change the past, right? But we change tomorrow today. So by the end of this talk, something's going to change. So I'm going to talk a little bit about self-rescue. So we all do pull-top rescue in this industry, the linemen do anyway, and I'm sure you do ladder rescue and we do manhole rescue for subways. But how often do any of you actually do pull-top rescue for real? I've gone around the country asking this question, and I'm going to share today a bunch of things I learned, because people don't realize I'm going to confess today. I've been doing my own little study to learn from you. And it turns out, because we practice pull-top rescue, it becomes a concept. We don't do a lot of it, which is good, because it's an anomaly. We shouldn't be trying to rescue people. And the people of you who are out there who did do the rescue, I'm sorry if I just triggered you, because it was a serious situation, could have been death, and you'll never forget it. But what if, let's think about this as a concept. What if we actually, on pull-top rescue day, we practice self-rescue, right? Let's imagine you're in a bucket truck, right? Or a pole, but let's say you're on a bucket truck and you're up in the bucket waiting to switch on a line, to energize the line that goes across the river. And it takes 30 minutes to get around the river, and the other crew is going to go over there and they're going to signal you when you can close the fuse in. And you're up there waiting in the bucket, it's a two-man crew, there's a guy on the ground, and you look and you hear thunder, there's a storm coming. So now you got a little time pressure and you're like on the radio, hey, let's get this going, I got to get out of here. And all of a sudden your hydraulics quit. And you're stuck up in the bucket. You're up in the bucket with a switch stick, and you can see lightning coming, and now your groundman's like going crazy. He's running the ground controls, he's running around your truck, and he falls and breaks his leg. And you got thunder coming, and you're stuck there. You got to get out of the bucket. Go ahead. Who that's listening right now that's a lineman is ready to get out of the bucket? If we practice self-rescue, that's a concept we can transfer to mental health on the same day. Once a year, we can say, look, calling 988 is self-rescue. All right, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time with this because I don't want to take too much time, but I'm going to go through a little. If you have this bag hanging in your truck, right, and you say, hey, I'm stuck, and I got to get out of here. So I have it pre-rigged. In this bag is a little harness, but let's say I could rig right to my harness to save time today, and I have a rope already rigged that I can throw, a rope bag, right, and I've got a harness already on. So I've got this rigged. So I can clip this into the hard point on my bucket, right? And I already have this tied with a munter hitch. And if you had time, I would show you how to use the munter hitch right now, but I don't. So I'm not going to. It's easy to tie. But I could clip this munter hitch. I'm going to release part of it because it's a little too tight for my weight. There. I could release this, hook this munter hitch into my harness. And this is it's called a prusik knot. I can clip this into another carabiner into my harness, and I can get out of the bucket. That's a self-rescue device made by you because you know the knots. If you're a tree trimmer watching this, you already know how to do a taunt line hitch. On a pole, you could take a hand line, split it, tie a long tail bowline and into your D's, wrap that taunt line hitch on, and you can just go down the hand line. But the idea isn't so much the exercise, it's the concept of self-rescue. When you start thinking about self-rescue, you might, when you get down as low as you feel, you might be able to dial those three numbers, 988. Or my guy working with me might recognize that he needs to call 988 for me. So imagine if we did that once a year. That's the end of my commercial. Self-rescue, call 988. All right, let's get back to the story here. So I got to warn you, I'm going to trigger you today. So I'm going to ask you to do something. So I've been traveling around the country like Brent does, and I noticed some things. I hand out these cards. And one place where I handed out the cards, When I get done, I go down and pick up the cards. I'll show you the cards later. It's a little exercise I want people to take home and do an experiment on themselves. And then I go around and pick up the cards that people leave on the table. And I brought the CEO of the company with me, and I'm walking around. I told him, I said, look, this table has 5 seats and 5 cards here, and this table has 5 seats and no cards. So that means 5 people either didn't value what I was telling them and weren't even interested in testing this thing on their own. And worse than that, there's probably some leader at this table that made it cool for the rest of them to do it. Because with the chemistry we release in us, releases in everyone around us, right? So if the leader says that this is BS, and I'm going to tell you right now, some of you guys are in a room right now because this is recorded, or if you're live watching, you might be in a room, and on the way there you got a text, yeah, we got to go sit and listen to some old guy BS about safety for an hour, right? Because you've already dismissed it. That's defend mode, right? That releases a different neurochemistry, and it's very unlikely if you're in defend mode that any of this will change anything. But discover mode is curiosity. Defend mode puts you in defense. Here's the problem with defend mode. When you're in defend mode, you're in evolutionary protective mode, right? When you're in protective mode, we're really fast and strong, but we're not that sharp. It's why you make mistakes when you're angry, frustrated, or anxious, or scared, right? So if you go into defend mode, it bypasses your frontal lobe, the seat of critical thinking and executive function. So think about that. And if you're dismissed and not paying attention, whatever thing you might learn today, whatever changes because of that, you won't know. So what I'm going to talk today about are invisible forces. The invisible forces that actually make the change are not, the card that I hand out isn't the thing. What the card does, the type of engagement it creates an invisible force that releases a different chemistry than defend mode, right? So it's a trigger. If you're feeling defensive or judgmental, I'm going to ask you just for the next hour, just let it go. I can't steal any of your beliefs. You own them. I don't take your beliefs. But I'm going to talk about things that maybe things you haven't heard before or make you feel uncomfortable because you haven't heard them. And when you feel that, just take a moment and recognize, because you're the one who's aware of your emotion. You aren't your emotion. All right, are we good? You guys, you think I sold that all right? All right, so I mean, I've showed up, and as soon as I get there, the lineman, I love it, because I was a lineman for 20 years, you guys. Linemen cross their eye, lean back, cross their arms in body posture, and leave a big sigh. And it's not our fault. We've been given a lot of information. The problem is information and knowledge is not power. The application of knowledge is power. So listen, if you're willing to stick with me for the rest of this, I'm going to give you something that can change everything. But if you're in defend mode, it's not your fault, but it won't change anything. Lisa Feldman Barrett, she wrote 7.5 Lessons on the Brain in 2021, I think, 20. And she wrote How Our Emotions Are Made in 2017. See, we don't have an emotion circuit, we create them. So when I ask linemen if someone can piss them off, they always say, oh yeah. And I say, well, isn't that interesting? You're really independent, make all your own decisions, except your emotions, because that's evidently that guy's job. It's not our fault, right? You guys who are listening, at a very young developmental age, when you're 5 years old in the back seat of the car, and your father gets cut off or mother, and they start cursing at that tourist, you actually learn in that developmental stage that someone in another car your parents don't know is in charge of their emotions. It's not true, it's just the wrong model. So this slide is kind of pertinent here. Sometimes we're responsible for things not because they're our fault, but because we're the only ones that can change them. And that's where we're going today. So I'm going to talk about motivation. Now, we've got a lot of motivational people here. I mean, Raphael Wilkins talks about assumptions, right? Some of you out there have already made an assumption, already blocked this with that assumptive neurochemical that it's hard for me to even penetrate. You've created this barrier, this invisible barrier, and you once you make that assumption, it's game over. So there's invisible barriers. They're intrinsic, they're internal. They're invisible. You can't see them, okay? And when we start aiming at communication, connection, and competency, right? When you aim at the 3 C's, communication, connection, and competency, we can't see that. It's invisible. But we focus on the outcome, the visible piece. Oh, look what happened, right? Or that incident that just happened. That's extrinsic. It's visible, right? It's external to us. So the power dynamic that's is invisible. You can't see that power dynamic, but a hierarchical, power dynamic where I'm in charge and you'll listen, is in a rules-based, compliance-based system, puts you in compliance and puts you in defend mode. Listen, I'm here to tell you, we can do both. We can be compliant and we can learn how to communicate better and connect better and aim at competence. Really, safety is a product of an engaged, connected, communicative, competent workforce. All right? When we aim at safety, we think safety is the thing we're aimed at. This is not to downgrade everybody who's got degrees in safety and your safety people. It's still important. It's a primary objective is to do things safely. But what we have to look at is the invisible force that creates the environment that makes the outcome safe. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. To do that, I got to tell you a little story. So I'm drinking this. I don't know if, can I say the name of this company? I don't know if I can or not. This is Pellegrino. I was down at the IP conference in Texas, and Brent Jeffries is down there. And he says, Billy, you need to start drinking this. We got to talk. He said, our brain's 85% water, and we know we can screw that water up. If we drink too much alcohol or we drink too much energy drink, it changes something about us, right? So the inverse of that is true too. If we drink good stuff, this has the minerals of the earth in it. It's mineral water. And you need to drink at least a bottle of this a day, and this is all I drink now since Brent Jeffries has turned me on to this. So I started drinking it in Texas in October. I come back to Saranac Lake, New York. Now I lived a little over 2 hours from Montreal, in the northern end in the cold end of New York. I come to my cafe, a little health food cafe I go to for a smoothie and homemade soup every day. My first meal a day, because I eat like around noon every day, first one. And I said, hey, do you guys have Pellegrino? And they're like, no. I said, listen, any chance you'll buy it? He said, sure, absolutely, So they buy a case of Pellegrino. And I come back 2 days later, and there it is in the cooler. You can see it right there in that picture. And I look out, and at 2 tables, there's people drinking Pellegrino. And I'm like, holy crap. If Brent Jeffries doesn't tell me about Pellegrino in Texas, nobody at my cafe in Saranac Lake is drinking Pellegrino. And even further, the people drinking Pellegrino have no idea how it got there. It just showed up like magic, right? They don't know the backstory, the invisible force. Well, Brent Jeffries is both a visible and invisible force, just for the record, right? But the invisible force that started it required someone to act on it. So if I just nodded and dismissed Brent and said, yeah, so you drink Pellegrino, nobody in Saranac Lake is drinking Pellegrino. But I'm in discover mode, and I want to know what the heck Brent Jeffries is talking about. So I'm going to test, evaluate for myself, do my own experiment on myself. And I have been drinking it ever since. And it would probably be worth a podcast on its own to just talk about mineral water, but I'm not going to do it here, right? So this will be a theme today. If Brent doesn't tell me about Pellegrino, nobody in Saranac Lake is drinking it. If you've already dismissed this because this is crazy and I already know everything I need to know, and you're in dismiss mode, defense mode, defend mode, nothing changes as a result of what I'm telling you, because nobody will hear about the Pellegrino. Did I go clear for you guys? All right, because sometimes my friend Cheryl Richardson's here, and she helps me be a little more logical, because sometimes I think things that... So when I talk about intrinsic motivation, internal motivation, so I'm headed to climb this mountain for my 4th time in June. And if you see the one mountain there with the V right at the top, I've already climbed the peak on the right, and one view is from the south side. I climbed that side. I summited in 2011. I was there, not to summit, but I was there halfway up it in 2024 in February. But I'm going to go. My friend is going to go with me. We're going to do this other one because it's the only peak on that mountain we haven't climbed. No rule is telling me to climb that. Nothing tells me I have to. It's intrinsic motivation. It's the internal drive for me to go climb that mountain. And I'm going to tell you, safety is not my first priority. Competence is. And my connection to the other climber and the climbing guides that are going to, our rock guides that are going to go with us, my connection to them, my ability to communicate with them, and our competency, that the product of that is going to be a safe climb, I can tell you right now. And we're hoping to do it in a day. It's about 1,200 feet to 17,120 feet, and it's quite a climb. And interestingly enough, you know, I'm 68, and the guy going with me will be just about 70. So there's a whole other story behind that too. But the thing that's driving me to do that is invisible. That's the point I want to make. The thing that when people were drinking Pellegrino, the thing that brought Pellegrino there for them was invisible. They were unaware, but they're enjoying the Pellegrino because they're focused on the outcome. So my goal today is to get you to see invisible barriers. This is the sound, breaking the sound barrier. It's invisible. It doesn't exist until we see it, right? So my job is to get you to see invisible barriers. And when we do, after today, you can't unsee it, all right? This is a view off my deck. I live on a lake up in northern New York. It's beautiful. And this is the exact same view. One view is the summertime. The deck is the same. It's the same piece of deck. You see snow on the deck in one and a frozen lake and no leaves on the trees. And you see leaves and plants and beautiful water on the other one. Exact same scene. But what changed? And what happens, we focus on the outcome often. Look, the lake is frozen, there's snow. But I want you to think about this. The thing that changed is invisible, right? The temperature changed. And everything in this scene is the same. But the invisible thing, the power of that small change, changes everything. It not only changes that, but it changes the clothes that I wear and the activities that I do. So the force that changes that is invisible. And that's the idea. Another quick look at this is Mount Kenya in 2007. It's my buddy. We had to cross a glacier back then. You can see in the one V, the glacier is is covering the little V in the rock there. That was 2007. I went back in 2024. That's what it looks like now. What we're seeing is the outcome of 17 years of change. If we showed up at any time during that change, we wouldn't have noticed anything. At any moment in that, we wouldn't have noticed anything. But over time, tiny changes, amazing result of James Clear. It's called the Atomic Habits book. The thing that changed is invisible. But look at the power that has, all right? These are monarch butterflies, all right? Monarch butterflies fly south, right? And they go every year. Do you know they get together every year and they don't text each other or even call each other or email? They just show up, right? And somehow they all know that. And they're made of the same stardust as us. We're made of the same minerals the same minerals I'm drinking in this water, right? Are made of those monarch butterflies. But how do they know? Because they're on the same frequency. Have you ever noticed a monarch butterfly, if you ever go to see them, you don't usually see them flying south with the hummingbirds because the hummingbirds are at a different frequency, and the geese and the loons and the elk and everything on our planet is connected. But what we tend to do is we alter our consciousness. Alcohol, energy drinks, coffee, right? All of those things alter our frequency. And I don't know if you guys have pets. Do any of you guys give your pets energy drinks, alcohol, and coffee? I mean, I don't think if those monarchs were at the bar last night, they'd be late, right? So Summer Rae talks about how you show up. You know, I can picture these monarchs. Hey, dude, did you go out last night? You know, because we had a long flight today. We somehow, for some unknown reason, alter our consciousness. And honestly, I think what it does, because I'm just doing this. I don't drink coffee, alcohol, or energy drinks to see if I change the chemistry of the 85% of that water in my brain, does it change anything in the conductivity? Of course it does. But I'm biased. I think I know what's happening but since I'm biased, I can't, I'll never prove it. But it's my own experiment on myself. I get to do that because I live here, right? So what I want you to see is what brings them together is invisible. What makes us safe at work, much of that is intrinsic drive. It's our ability to connect, and all of that is invisible. All right, so I hope I didn't oversell that. I'm trying to take my time. Cheryl's convinced me that this is complex, and I really need to just make sure you have time for this to sink in, all right? So I'm gonna give you a couple of minutes and talk about me just for a minute, just so you know a little bit of who I am. I am Billy Martin. That's a picture of me in the yellow hard hat there. That yellow hard hat was my father's. It had a leather insert. He got it right after World War II when he started working for Niagara Mohawk, when he was a World War II Marine. Went to work for the power company. My grandfather was a World War I Navy and was also worked for the power company. I'm third generation, and my sister retired from the power company. But what you see there, you can see the visible compliance things that we have to do right there. We're all wearing hard hats. We're all wearing bucket harnesses. You can see the grounds in the background. We need to fulfill the rules and the compliance, right? But what you can't see is the connection between those us there. The fellow next to me, his name's John Arcuri, in the bucket, he and I worked at least 1,000 hours overtime every year together. And we were so connected, we hardly had to speak to each other because we were so connected. But John never shut up. Well, every time he would get up in the bucket, he'd be like, okay, I'm moving over here, Bill. Okay, listen, I'm cutting this. Okay, ready? Going hot. All right, going hot. Hey, listen, I'm moving these bells. I mean, he was like a mouth, with a body with a mouth on it that never stopped. And it's the reason we stayed safe, because he made sure the connection was always solid. You know when you're trying to listen to something or watch TV and you lose connection, you get all frustrated because it's staticky? We do that to each other all the time. We disconnect and it's all staticky, but we don't connect back, right? So the invisible part you can't see, the invisible power is our connection. The visible thing is the rule and the compliance. That's extrinsic because you can see it. The intrinsic part you can't. So I'll go back to that just for a minute. A quick history. I was a lineman. I was with the power company for 34 years. Then I went to work for a contractor for up to almost another 10. I was project manager for Make Ready, Bare Hand. I was a safety director. And then I did what everybody does. I quit and went to nursing school, graduated when I was 60, because every lineman does that. And then I did that because while I was doing this, I was flying as a paramedic on a helicopter for 23 years. And when I retired, I decided to go to nursing school so I could spend another 6 or 7 years flying as a flight nurse paramedic. And I also have a diploma in mountain medicine, and I do medicine in austere environments. I'm a ski patrol instructor trainer. But what you don't see is that when I was, at one point when I was 38, I had a brain tumor, a 5-centimeter brain tumor, and I got 20 hours of brain surgery. They told me I'd never be a lineman again because they're wiping out the balance nerve on this side. And listen, remember I told you we aren't normal? The doctor said, look, what do you do? I said, I'm a lineman. He said, what the hell is that? I said, well, I climb poles and run wire and ride in bucket trucks. It's a blast. He said, anything else that requires balance? I said, oh, I'm a ski instructor. He said, look, dude, you might have to think about changing careers, and I don't know, because I'm going to wipe out your entire balance nerve. All that's going to be left is your eardrum on this side, right? So I get the operation. I wake up in a hospital for 8 days. 3 weeks later, I do a handstand in his office, and he says, how's your balance? I do a handstand. He says, look, don't do that. I said, why? He said, because I stuff your eustachian tube full of meat so your brain won't leak, and going upside down puts a lot of pressure. Please don't do that, right? I said, oh, sorry, And I said, well, he said, but look, I'm really thrilled. He says, evidently that tumor was so big, you had already compensated for that nerve damage beforehand. I said, doctor, it's a good thing I'm a lineman. He said, why? I said, because I know people that would have quit their job and sold their skis. You really need to be careful what you tell people, right? Because not everybody is as resilient as the percentage of people that are in this industry. The people that leave their families, miss dinners, miss movies, right? You can tell me, but I'm going to test it myself, right? It's the reason why a lot of linemen that get a shock tested twice. I get a shock. You think so? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Right? I've seen that like 10 times in my career. But what I'm trying to tell you is They were wrong because they underestimate us. And honestly, you all underestimate you. You have this invisible power with you right now to connect with people at higher cognitive levels. And when you're in discover mode, that happens. That's logic, reason, and intuition. When you're in defend mode, not so much. It's kind of like looking at most of the people around us. So I spent 23 years on this helicopter. The same thing, you can see the visible compliance. I have to know the rules and how to approach a running helicopter. It was 3 to go, 1 to say no. We always did a debrief. We wore helmets, fire retardant suits. That's the invisible part. But the invisible part is how we're designed. I'm just going to spend a minute in biology here with you. I'm talking to you right now. And the sound is going into your ear, and you can see that in this, and there's a whole description here. I'm not going to read it to you. But what's happening, that sound is invisible. That vibration is invisible. And it's going into your ear, and it's creating a waveform that your brain is translating to English. Because you landed in English, and maybe you speak Spanish too, and I don't speak Spanish, but gracias. ¿Cómo estás? Muy bien? Yeah, that's about all I know. Because you landed in English, that's the one your brain translates, but it's one of 7,139 languages your brain is capable of translating. Think about that. The invisible power there. I'm vibrating the air. You're not hearing my words. It's vibrating your eardrums, and your brain is translating that sound. All right? All right. I want to show you what your brain is actually seeing. So this is a vibration plate, and he's putting salt on it. And I'll only play it for a little bit because I don't want to take the whole time of this video. But as the sound changes, you'll see patterns from the salt, the higher the frequency is. So that frequency is creating that. All right? The higher the frequency, the more complex the waveform is. Listen, folks, when I vibrate your ears, when it resonates with you, this is what your brain is seeing waveform and interpreting it to a language. This is objective reality. It's what is, right? And it's hard for us even to comprehend this machine that sits on our neck. What I'm teaching you about today is the most complex machine you operate that nobody teaches you about. And when we understand how it operates, we understand that not only does a frequency change shape and waveform, it changes the chemistry we release in us. If I tell you you're stupid, it releases a different chemistry from that waveform than if I tell you you're brilliant. One puts you in defend mode, the other moves you forward. So you get the picture, right? The more complex, isn't that cool? So I got to stop that for a minute. So I'm going to do another little object lesson with you here to try to drive that home. These are 2 tuning forks, and I have a little device on one. You can see it right here. It has a little thing to change the tone. So if I tap this, you hear that tone, and this one's a little bit different tone, right? So if I tap this one and I stop it, you hear nothing. See that? Because they're different tones because I adjusted it. Nothing. This is its tone. But if I remove this thing that changed the tone, if I can, and I tap this one, and I stop this from ringing, is that coming through okay, Jeremy? If I stop this from ringing, when it's at the same frequency, it vibrates that. When we're connected and we're at the same frequency, our brain's actually synchronized. Tan Lee from Neurogeneration did a study. They put EEG headsets on high school students, and when they made eye contact, their brainwaves synchronized. But when we resonate with each other, you hear music you like, you tap your foot involuntarily because it's resonating with you, right? The other thing we call this is get with the program. Get on the same wavelength, right? Imagine a football team in a huddle, and they're about to do a play, and a football team huddles every 40 seconds. And they're in that huddle, and one of them stands out and says, yeah, I'm not participating in this huddle today. How long would that guy be on the team? We're a line team, and it's time that when we right after our job brief, we need to huddle, because we need to resynchronize so we're all on the same frequency. Does that make sense to you? All right? So if we get on the same frequency, everybody's with the program. Oh, look, the flaggers aren't in my huddle. They're on this, but they're part of the same team. If we don't get them at the same frequency, they're going to stand under the phase you're transferring. And they don't even know about step potential. Oh, look, there's a project manager here walking around and we're in our huddle. We're a team. We need to start drawing everybody into this huddle right after the job brief. So everybody's, and you guys that are in the management that have these big meetings, it's really hard for a worker in the field or in the station or in underground or anywhere in this industry to come and get in your meeting. But you have too many meetings already. Let's miss one a week and show up for their job brief, right? Take turns going down to the job and becoming part of their job so we create a team. We stop this division of us and them. It's just us, folks, right? And when we're at the same frequency, everybody vibrates. Okay, that was fun. All right. So I'm going to move on here a little bit. I need to do this because what we see is determined by what we aim at. And it's called the RPD model, recognition primed decision making, right? It's Gary Klein. He wrote Sources of Power, which was remade in 2020, and he wrote Seeing What Others Don't. But if we don't have that thought, that prime in our head or that pattern, then it's hard to tell what it is we're looking at. Now, some of you can tell what that is already for whatever reason, but at least half of you have no idea what you're looking at right there. It looks like black and white blobs. So when you can't tell, you don't know that somebody else sees what it is, but they don't know that you don't, right? Right? And then when you know what it is, all of a sudden, it becomes obvious it's changed in that instant. Your eyes are looking at the same thing, but it has changed what you see. And so what we have to do is realize that when we're on the same frequency, we need to find out if everybody's looking and seeing the same thing, because sometimes we don't, right? This is another one a lot of you have tried. I take this with me all the time. Some of you right now are going through millions and millions of billions of neurons in your head trying to figure out what that's most like. It's not what you think it is, it's what it's most like in your experience. And if you don't know, you see black and white blobs, right? Or a skull or a map. But if I give you this clue, instantly, your brain is so fast, instantly, oh, it's a cow. It's called the Renshaw cow, it's actually a photograph. The really cool thing is now when you look at it, we all see the same thing. But a minute ago, we didn't. If we're not on the same frequency and we're not communicating, I don't know that you don't see what I see. Does that make sense to you? Right? If you're not in discover mode and you're in defend mode, oh, I don't know what that is, doesn't matter, right? I can do this too. This is a CAT scan of a guy that I flew that broke all the bones in his face. And I do this often with audiences. It's pretty awful looking. And I won't show you a picture of what his face, because that was pretty awful looking also. But I knew the guy, and his name was Dominic. And he actually went face first and feet through, doing gondola evac. I'm on that team also. His feet went right through the gondola window and his face stopped on the gondola. And then he self-rescued off the top of that gondola, rappelled himself with his broken face, which I thought was incredible. I was on the bottom because I could stop his descent if he passed out. So he got to the bottom and he's laying down and there's blood coming out of his mouth. And I said, and so right now you know that much of the story. And you know that it's a broken face and it has affected part of your brain. But I'm going to invisibly affect another part of your brain right now, an invisible force, just using my words, which are going to vibrate a different part of your brain. The reason I knew it was a broken face, because he's laying on his side and he said, Dominic, what does that feel like? And he said, I can move the roof of my mouth with my tongue. And when I tell an audience that, how many of you just touched the roof of your mouth with your tongue, right? So I didn't tell you to do that. Your body just did an assessment involuntarily based on my words. I vibrated the air into a wavelength in your brain that caused your brain to release a chemical and a bunch of electrical impulses to move your tongue. That's the power. That's the power of Pellegrino. Right? That's it. I do this quite often. I talk about how, the monarchs, they don't need cell phones, and they all get together and fly south, and they don't fly south with hummingbirds, even because they're at a different frequency. How do they do that, right? If we're made of the same thing as they are, the same elements, and they can communicate and get all together to go on vacation without having going on Expedia, then how are they doing that? And since we're the higher species, shouldn't we be able to do that? So I asked the audience that, and they, of course, most people say, I can't do that, right? Well, there they go. So what I have them do, I asked 250 people, this was in Boston, and I said, all right, would you guys all applaud, please? I said, just applaud like I'm all done and I did a really good job. And what's really good, it's early in, and if you're all applauding, it makes me feel good. In case I suck later and you don't want to applaud, at least I got an applause. And everybody laughs. And when they laugh, that releases a different neurochemical also, and it synchronizes them at the same frequency of oxytocin, just for the record. So they clap, and everybody's, that's good. And then I said, great, now I want everybody to do that again. Everybody to clap, but I want everybody to clap at exactly the same moment and keep going until that happens. Only instructions I give. And in 3 to 5 seconds, the entire room is clapping in synchrony. And because of the excitement, they always speed up the tempo. Feel like they're going to do a Russian dance, you know what I mean? And they're laughing, right? And what they just proved is those birds aren't saying, hey, turn left, turn right, turn left, right? Those birds are aware of the 5 or 6 birds around them, who are aware of the 5 or 6 birds around them, and just doing what they're doing. Everyone in the audience is clapping, aware of the 5 or 6 people around them, who are aware of the 5 or 6 people around them, and they do exactly the same thing as those birds. So not only are we designed the same, but we can do the same thing. Another invisible force, if you've bought a new car, right? Anybody ever buy a new car? And then you're on the interstate, you're driving, all of a sudden you see that car everywhere. Oh my gosh, there's the same model as mine. Sometimes the same color, right? Were those cars there before? Of course. But you didn't have a concept of a car. You don't have a concept of self-rescue. Without a concept of self-rescue, it's hard to dial 988. You don't have a concept of the car, so you don't see it. But now you see it without your permission. It shows up, right? If it's called the RPD model, right? Recognition primed decision model, decision making. Once you recognize it, your brain goes to work without you to point out that concept. So I have another program where I hand out these cards. These are the cards that the guys left on their table. When the CEO went with me from this one company, he said, well, does it bother you that they left it? I said, no. But what should bother you is that this table of 5 people left them and this table didn't. And if you're trying to steer a culture to get in sync, this table's out of sync. And maybe only one guy's out of sync and causing everyone else to be out of sync. Because defend mode is as contagious as discover mode. Stress is as contagious as happiness, right? So the red flag birds is just like the car, right? If you have this card, you should start hearing the words at work, I think maybe should be, might be, probably. And people have died in our industry because somebody said, yeah, should be fine. And it wasn't. Yeah, is that open? Yeah, should be good. Oh, you don't need to test. Should be fine. And they die, right? So all this is, we can go ahead with a maybe, but not without slowing down a little bit to consider the consequence of the action. And the words is just like buying a new car, is to prime you. The other thing we're doing is a concerns program. Richardson's is doing it in theirs. I think O'Connell Electric, there's a Mark Taylor up in Canada is doing it. It's international now, right? I know National Grid fossil fuel, the safety rep there brought these cards to England, right? So this is a chance for us to get on the same side of the road, to get in sync, to see the card is of no consequence. It's not the card, it's the invisible thing the card does. You will start to hear concerns, the word concern and predictions more. So think about this. In order to have a near miss program, you have to have a near miss. In order to have an incident analysis, I have to have an incident. A concern precedes a near miss. If Brent and I are going out to do a job and he says, no, Billy, I'm a little concerned about this, and we change our decision, right, because of what we're going to do, the thing that might have happened doesn't happen. We can't measure or manage things that don't happen. But a concern can erase an incident, any race and near miss. And when we start to share them, it also creates an environment of a shared communication, a shared responsibility, which is invisible. So roles and concerns is something we do right after the job brief. Just 3 minutes, you get together in a huddle, and then somebody says, finger licking, and I see the word good in a chicken, right? That's how it works. If we don't raise a concern and we don't see it, if we can't imagine it, we can't predict it. It's just a fact, right? You couldn't predict the cow before you couldn't imagine that was a cow until you knew, and then you can't unsee it. And some of you couldn't tell that was a bumblebee, and then now you can see it. You didn't see the cars around you on the interstate until you bought one. So when you share a concern, you're imagining what's possible. And once you imagine it, and if you don't predict it, you can't mitigate. So a concern is a prediction of an unwanted outcome. Just for the record, the invisible chemicals that you release, if I tell you, if I get on and say, hey, what the heck are you doing that for? And you will defend mode, justify, and rationalize. Well, because somebody told me to. I'm justifying and rationalizing what I do. So it's easy to pick out, you guys. If you want to get on what you aim at, it determines what you see, right? What you see is determine what you aim at. So you can go on the job, just look for defend mode. And that's the young lineman says, hey, I'm really good at my job. You don't need to tell me what to do. That's defend mode, right? It's not their fault. The industry has created it. I mean, I know really perfectly capable linemen that get fired from a contractor and end up working for another ones because they became suddenly incompetent enough to fire, evidently. And then we sit you through years of safety stand-downs. And the reason we keep having them after incidents is because they work so good to prevent the next one. Not, right? Right? So cortisol is a real thing. It's invisible, but it's contagious. If I'm stressed, you're going to feel it, right? And it puts us in defend mode, which blocks our executive function. It means we can't. So if we have a toxic worker or a toxic boss, he's put us in a rule-based, compliance-based, what's the word? Extrinsic environment, right? He's put us in an extrinsic environment that's going to make us block our executive function. He just made us stupid. The other side is oxytocin, dopamine, and serotonin and endorphins. But oxytocin and dopamine have a half-life of 1 to 6 minutes. Cortisol is 66 minutes. So we need to dump more oxytocin and dopamine more often. So when you're stressed, it's going to come back. So I got to say, hey, I got to put my hand on somebody I'm working with. Say, hey, you're doing a really good job. Hey, how are you doing, buddy? And you look them in the eye, and you say, how's your wife? How's your kids? Something doesn't feel right. Are you going to be okay to go in the bucket today? That caring is something we're not doing. I'm going to talk a little bit about some more things I do. This is on Mount Rainier. It was 2014. I was on a rope team. That's Mount St. Helens in the background. And we do crevasse rescue because above 10,000 feet where we have 100-foot thick glaciers, they're on a slope and gravity separates them into cracks. And then the weather up there creates snow bridges. And if you happen to be walking across, you're not tied together, you die. So you get tied together with a rope. And when you're physically connected with a rope, I'm physically connected to somebody, right? And you can see in this team, it's hard to see in this picture, these people are all tied together with a rope, right? You can a little clearer here, you can see the rope in the foreground. This is us, and those are crevasses, right? That's a practicing, we actually do a practical exam. We have to step into a crevasse and just fall to our death while somebody behind us dives on an ice axe. That looks like this, right? So everybody has an ice axe, and you have to hold it, dive on it, and then because of their weight, it spins you in the direction of the crevasse. And then you kick your crampons in so they don't drag you in. And once you've stopped their fall, the next person is free because it's a team sport. They have to come around, drive a couple pitons, a couple ice things, and then tie off to that rope to anchor that person so it frees me up, right? And then we create a raising system. So what I often do, and this is something you can do, and you can try this yourself, is I tie people together with a rope. And you can see we make a fake harness on them right there. and I hook a carabiner to them, and I make loops in the rope, and I give them all canes. These guys have canes because I don't want anybody to risk cutting themselves on an ice axe. And then I have they say, hey, I want you, little obstacle course, just walk around the room, go around that row, go around that chair in the back of the room, then leader, make a U-turn and come back. So they start going, you know, and they're kind of laughing because they feel silly. And before I go further, there are places that I've been in the country, I can't do this. Because the people are so damaged in defend mode, they can't get out of their seat. When I say, hey, can somebody come and do this? Nobody stands up. Folks, that's defend mode, and it's not your fault. It's the environment that's created that, right? We can choose to come out of that and just be willing, vulnerable enough to be courageous enough to see what happens. Experiment on yourself. So these people are walking around, and right when they make the U-turn, I usually do this. I go, hey, listen, we've got a little time pressure on this job. Let's speed it up. And quite often the leader starts to go faster and doesn't talk to the guy behind him, and he goes, whoa, wait a minute, because you're tied together physically, right? And he jerks that guy, and they laugh. And then they come back. And then I have them do it twice. And the second time, I come over to one guy and say, hey, listen, don't do anything they're doing. Be a disruptor, right? So then the guy in the end, or in the middle, wherever he happens to be, they'll turn to go this way and he'll go this way. And he yanks everybody. They go, hey, and they do just what we do at work. Say, hey, what's wrong with you? Come on, you idiot. Get with the program, right? Let's get with the program. And they laugh, and then he does it again. And then we get back and they say, well, how'd that go? They say, well, all good except for that idiot. You know what I mean? And and everybody's laughing. So then I asked the audience, so the first trip, did you notice anything? They said, well, yeah, the leader had to slow down because even when he sped up, he has to slow down to account for the rest of his team because they're physically connected. And I asked the team member, so what happens? Did you notice anything? And they said, well, yeah, I have to adjust because of the slack in the rope to the person in front and behind me. I said, well, what's really interesting about this object lesson is when you're physically connected, you automatically do that intrinsically. I don't have to tell you to do that. You sense it, so you do it. The leader comes to the turn and he slows down to go around the corner, looks back at his team, right? Folks, we don't need the rope to do that. That's the object lesson, right? And what's interesting, when I do it the second time and I have somebody go off out of sync, we do just what we do at work. We yell at them. We ask them what's wrong. We say, what's your problem? But I'm going to tell you, when I'm above 10,000 feet and I have somebody on my rope team that can't stay in sync, I have to call an all-stop. In that rope team, nobody calls an all-stop. They just yell at the guy. They do exactly what we do at work, right? And I have to stop and come back to the person, say, look, are you okay? Because we're over 10,000 feet. Do you have altitude sickness? Are you injured? Is there a reason you can't stay in sync with us? And let's try this again. But I have to tell them this out of the compassion of my heart. Look, if you can't stay in sync with us on this rope team, you have to go down because you're going to kill somebody else, right? So when we're in a team and we're in a crew, if you have somebody that's pulling the team out of sync, we shouldn't be yelling at them. We should be fixing it. And not everybody can work together as a team. So if somebody can't get in the football huddle, maybe they need to be a gymnast and work alone, right? If you're working on a team, a line team, and you have somebody who's out of sync, maybe there's meant to be a traveling operator or some other position, but it's not okay. The number one killer of our workforce isn't the work. It's drugs, alcohol, and suicide, right? And we are focused on that SIF, prevent that SIF from ever happening. What if the environment that improves our connection fixes all of them, right? So there's a word I'm just going to give you, and I'm trying. I don't know. I'm going quite a long time here, but I have to tell you this. I learned this word. Actually, I met a guy from Israel who did a study on the word yes and, those two words, and yes but. And in that study, that he found that people that said yes and moved forward. The people that said yes but, not so much, because but was a stopper of momentum, right? And in 1994, the book Built to Last, written by Collins and Porras, was a study of the 18 most visionary companies in the country against the 18 companies that weren't. Back then it was General Electric and Westinghouse, Boeing, McDonnell Douglas. All the companies had an average of 92 years. And there's a bunch of really interesting things in that book that some of it's outdated now. But there was a page that said the wisdom of the and, the tyranny of the or. The word and against the word or. The 18 most visionary companies in the country embraced the word and. They said, we can do that and this. So I taught it to my daughter who's 5 and my son who's 10, because she was like, Daddy, I don't know what to do. I want to do this or that. I said, listen, I just told you this book. You can do both. Work it out. You can do this. You can go skating today and you can go play in the snow. We can just time it, right? So then at the time I was a pretty busy guy. I was working 1,000 hours a year as a lineman. I had 9 apartments that I owned and managed. I was a ski instructor. It's just before I had the brain tumor. And I'm sitting at the table and I'm thinking about becoming a ski patrol because I don't want to be too busy, right? So I'm talking to the family having dinner. I said, I'm just doing way too much. I don't think I can do that. And my daughter looks at me. She says, Daddy, you can be a lineman and a ski patrol. And now I'm screwed because I'm her role model, right? So I have to do it now because I already told her about the and. So I did, and I've done a lot of other things since then, and a lot more. But the end of the story, the really funny thing, it wasn't funny, it was heartwarming. I went to my daughter's graduation from law school in Suffolk Law 20 years later. She gave me a card, and it was a thank you card. And in the thank you card, it said, thank you for teaching me about the and. She also said, she called me when she was in law school and she says, Daddy, she said, what? She said, nobody here knows what a lineman is. I said, what are you talking about? She said, well, we're getting to know each other down here and we're saying, what does your dad do? And I'm like, well, my dad's a lineman. And they're like, well, what the heck is a lineman? I said, they don't know. Why don't they know? She said, because every one of their parents are lawyers. And I've tested this around the country. I've asked groups of linemen, raise your hand if any of your parents are lawyers. Almost nobody raises their hand because not everybody is designed to do the same thing. We are designed to do exactly what we're doing. And that's why we do it. And that's why we occupy such a small space in this industry. The other thing I do is I hand out these, everybody here has a puzzle piece. Because as a social experiment, I hand out puzzle pieces. This is to anchor a concept that everyone has a piece of your puzzle. There's a thing called socially distributed cognition or collective intelligence. And if I dismiss anyone, I don't get their puzzle piece. That person, I said, well, I was stupid. They're very unlikely to contribute again. In psychological safety, if it's safe to contribute, that person will contribute. If it's not safe to contribute, it's unlikely they will. So if you have that puzzle piece in your pocket, it may make you more tolerant. The other thing I talk a lot about are these seeds. And it's a quick story. There are 2 different seeds, right? They're different colors, they're different sizes and shapes. Sunflower seed and a corn seed. They're genetically coded to grow 2 completely different plants. But we have the power to release their potential. And once we know the formula to release their potential, we can either plant them and release their potential, or we can suppress their potential by just doing nothing, right? Or I can throw those seeds into the wind. It is windy today. I can throw the seeds to the wind, and you might see the seeds growing in a crack in the pavement or in a gutter. So their future potential could be random. It's the same. The reason the formula is the same is because their biology is the same. We have that power over every seed on the planet to release the potential or to suppress it. And if you're in a group, look at the person next to you. We have the same biology. We have the exact same power over each other. We can release potential or we can suppress it. Just by vibrating air and changing wavelengths in your brain. And that, my friends, is a much more powerful thing than you can even imagine. This is what random looks like. The future isn't random, it's what we decide it is. Right? Every decision you make is in the future. Your brain's designed to do everything you tell it. Everything you tell it to do is in the future. But if we get on the same side of the rudder, that's what it looks like. That's what it looks like, right? The synergy of a group is as important, if not more important, than the talent of the individuals. Rick Rubin, right? So you might be the best lineman in the world, the best stations operator, but your talent, it's a transaction between you, everyone, and everything around you. If you don't create a transaction and you dismiss it by vibrating the wrong thing, the wrong air, you're missing part of it. And then when that happens, somebody's out of sync. Folks, this is the leadership principle that we're not doing. We need to look for the person that's out of sync and get them back in. That person on the rope, we don't yell at them, don't fire them. Let's help them become the best version they can possibly be and get them back in sync. If they can't, let's help them find out where they fit. Because if it's not here, and if you're listening to me right now and you know what I'm talking about, you guys, it's not our fault. We are a compliance-based, rule-based system. We even call the apprenticeship a boot camp, right? The military is a social hierarchy, rule-based, compliance-based system. It has a mental health crisis right now. It's no coincidence that so do we. Because when you're in a rule-based, compliance-based system, you're extrinsically motivated. You're not internally motivated. And it inhibits your ability to be happy, to put it in a nutshell, right? When you're in sync, it looks like this. They're in sync. Imagine what that looks like out of sync, right? People get thrown out of boats when it's like that, right? So you right now, some of you are going to work today. And when you're at work, you're noticing, yeah, that's just Joe. Joe's like that. Just leave him alone. Joe's just like that. Listen, we can't do that anymore. Joe has to get with the program. He's got to get at the same frequency as everybody else. And if Joe can't, he's really good at his work, but he needs to find another job. Something where he doesn't have to be in sync, somebody else's life relies on it. Or somebody that isn't going to change the frequency of somebody so that their cognitive load is now focused on Joe and not on their work, right? I know this is a little painful. It is for me because I've been that guy. So this is what I want to talk a little bit about, and it's, I want you to be careful not to go into defend mode here. So I just went online. Safety first is all over the country, right? But I got to tell you, those rowers that are rowing aren't thinking about safety first. They're thinking about synchronized and the effort and being competent, right? Safety is a product of the environment. If I'm going to go work with you, our job is to make the company successful. So I have a job. And that company relies on the work. And there's a transaction between the work, the worker, and the company. And our first priority is to be competent, to communicate, to get connected. And safety becomes a product of that. If you put safety first, we're focused on something that doesn't exist. Because without any part of that transaction between me, the work, and the company, safety doesn't exist without that transaction. Does that make sense? Did that make sense to you guys? All right. So I'm not downplaying safety. We have degrees in safety, and there's things we can do to make safety one of our objective, right? But the objective has to be this. Competence, connection, and communication is intrinsic and invisible. When we get good at this, you can't see it, but you feel it. When you guys are working and it's 2 o'clock and you say, holy cow, it's 2 o'clock. Where did the day go? You were in a flow state. It's awesome. It creates an environment where safety is a result of the visible outcome of safety. The visible outcome off my deck is a winter created by the temperature. The visible output of safety is a result of those things. But the thing that creates it is invisible. You have right now, you can choose discover mode or defend mode. And you do it, their first reaction is always a biological one. When I react, it's because of the chemistry of my biology, because I'm evolutionary built, right, to run from the lion. But if you can go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 and just unhack your biology, you can decide, you can be hungry and not eat. You can be tired and not sleep for a certain length of time because we can unhack that biology. So the next time you feel defend mode, just wait a minute. Your job when you're driving down the road and you get a roadblock is to go into the future around that roadblock somewhere. Your brain does exactly the same thing. Defend mode is a roadblock. And if you give it a minute, it'll show you what you need to do to respond. But don't let that person decide what your response is. They don't get to decide your response if you're independent. So you choose. And if you need help with this, I'm happy to help you. But if you just spend a day, look who's in defend mode and fix that. That's the leadership principle you need to look at. Synchronize your workforce so you can find out who's in defend mode and help them get out of it. These are my references. I'm happy if you want to email me, I'll give you an email slide here in a minute. I'm happy to send them to you or take a picture of that right now. There's a lot more references, but those are the ones that I used today for a lot of this report. And this is my email. And so here's what I'm going to tell you. I'm going to show you a document. And it's going to be something for you to test and evaluate. And really this is I do this all over the country. I want to see who's in Discover mode, all right? So you can email me at influenceteamdynamics@gmail.com or call me, whatever you want. And I'll send you this document, all right? And all this is something for you to test and evaluate to create an engagement in like a roundtable discussion. So I'm going to talk to you about this. The document title is The Risk of Aiming at Safety as a Priority. And I'm just going to go through some of what it's about. Like number one is what we see is determined by what we aim at. It says selective attention and confirmation bias. Our brains filter information based on goals, values, and expectations. We process what is relevant by our aims and discard what isn't. Right? You've ever seen the basketball thing where there's a gorilla walks across the court? It was a study where if we focus on how many times they pass the basketball, we miss the gorilla. So if I flip through this quickly, if we can't imagine it, we can't predict it. That goes to the psychological basis and the objective reality of it. I talk about the problem about aiming at safety. And I don't want you to believe this or agree with it. What I want you to do is recognize that safety is a concept, not a tangible action, right? It's the byproduct of systems, relationships, and behavior. And aiming at safety often results in compliance-based behaviors, rule following, rather than fostering the intrinsic motivation required for sustained engagement. So if you call me, I'll send you this document and then have a little discussion. And what I'm interested in is feedback is what do they think? Those are the 4 words. If we start doing that, we create a discussion around safety and it helps everybody. Safety is a social construct, and I talk about that. And the end is practical suggestions of the document that talks about how to shift organizational focus, reimagine safety training, encourage predictive thinking, modeling leadership transactions, and measuring what matters. And I'll just read the conclusion to you. I haven't done this before this way, so it's a little different, but by aiming at competence, connection, and synchronization, we can shift safety from being superficial, compliance-driven goal to an emergent property of well-functioning, engaged, and connected workforce. Safety is not a thing, it's a social construct that arises when people are empowered, trusted, and aligned with shared goals. By focusing on the foundational elements of human interaction and skill, we create environments that are not only safe, but productive, innovative, and resilient. So the whole idea here, and I want to thank you for this opportunity, Brent, and you guys, and Jeremy, and this is an awesome opportunity, is a lot of what makes this connection is invisible. It's an invisible superpower, but we are aware of it because we sense it. So if you're in defend mode, let's learn how to switch to discover mode, right? And the thing that we want to motivate is not the extrinsic thing, the thing you see or the outcome, it's what produces the outcome. So I hope this went all right. Thank you very much, and hasta luego.